In the heart of the Andes, a single kingdom began to grow. What started as a small city-state nestled in the Cusco Valley would soon become one of the greatest empires in the Americas. The Incas did not rise by accident. They rose through ambition, strategy, and sheer force. Their expansion was relentless. With each conquest, they swallowed new lands, new people, and new cultures into their growing domain. But how did they do it? How did a handful of warriors from a remote mountain valley build an empire that stretched thousands of miles along the western edge of South America? This story is not just about battles and kings. It is about the choices, conflicts, and turning points that shaped a civilization. Along the way, we will meet powerful rulers, uncover hidden truths, and explore the tensions that made Inca expansion both brilliant and brutal. As we journey through this history, we will see how one empire came to dominate the Andes and what happened when its reach became too great. Long before the Inca Empire existed, the Andes were home to many civilizations. The Moche, Wari, Nazca, and Chimu had all risen and fallen in different regions. Each left behind grand cities, intricate art, and complex societies. Yet none managed to unify the vast Andean world under a single rule. That task fell to the Incas. At first, they were just another group among many. Their early history is wrapped in legend, but archaeology tells us they lived in the highlands near Lake Titicaca. By the 12th century, they had settled in the Cusco Valley, a fertile region surrounded by towering peaks. For centuries, they remained a minor power, overshadowed by stronger kingdoms like the Chanca and the Chimu. However, everything changed in the early 1400s. A new ruler emerged, Viracocha Inca, who faced a crisis that would shape the empire's destiny. The threat came from the Chanca people, a fierce and well-organized enemy who sought to conquer Cusco itself. When their armies marched toward the city, panic spread among the Incas. Viracocha Inca, the aging ruler, chose retreat over battle. He fled with his chosen heir, leaving the city defenseless. But not all accepted defeat. A younger prince named Pachacuti refused to run. While his father abandoned Cusco, Pachacuti stayed behind and rallied those willing to fight. With limited forces, he prepared for a desperate stand against overwhelming odds. The Chanca expected an easy victory. Instead, they met resistance. In a decisive battle outside the city walls, Pachacuti led his men to an unlikely triumph. His leadership turned the tide, saving Cusco and proving his strength. The victory marked a turning point. It was not just a military success, it was the beginning of a new era. Pachacuti would go on to reshape the Inca state, transforming it from a regional power to an unstoppable force. Pachacuti wasted no time consolidating his power after the battle. He declared himself the new ruler, pushing aside his father and brother who had fled during the siege. Under his leadership, the Incas adopted a bold vision to expand beyond the Cusco Valley and bring surrounding lands under their control. Unlike previous leaders who focused only on survival, Pachacuti saw the potential for empire. He restructured the government, strengthened the military, and launched a series of campaigns aimed at subduing rival groups. His approach was calculated. Rather than conquering through brute force alone, he used diplomacy, alliances, and strategic marriages to win over local leaders. Those who resisted faced swift retaliation. Those who submitted were often allowed to keep their traditions so long as they pledged loyalty to the Inca. Over time, Pachacuti's methods proved effective. One by one, neighboring territories fell under Inca rule. The empire was born, not in a single moment, but through a series of carefully planned expansions that reshaped the political landscape of the Andes. As the empire expanded, Pachacuti understood that ruling such a vast territory required more than just military might. He needed a system that could integrate diverse peoples, manage resources, and ensure loyalty across distant lands. To achieve this, he introduced sweeping reforms that transformed the Inca state into a highly organized machine. Central to his vision was the concept of Tawantisunu, the four regions, which divided the empire into manageable administrative zones. Each region was governed by officials appointed directly by the emperor, ensuring control from the top down. Roads were built or improved to connect every corner of the realm, allowing messages, soldiers, and goods to move swiftly. These roads formed part of an extensive network that would become one of the most advanced transportation systems in the pre-Columbian world. In addition, Pachacuti promoted a standardized language, Quechua, to facilitate communication across conquered territories. Religious unity was also crucial. He elevated the worship of Inti, the sun god, positioning the Inca ruler as the divine representative of this supreme deity. Through these measures, Pachacuti laid the foundation for an empire that could endure beyond his reign. With a strong central government in place, Pachacuti turned his attention to the north, where the powerful Chimu Empire controlled much of the Peruvian coast. Unlike the highland peoples, the Chimu had developed a sophisticated society based on irrigation, trade, and monumental architecture. Their capital, Chanchan, was one of the largest pre-Columbian cities in South America. Conquering them would not be an easy task. Rather than launching a direct assault, Pachacuti employed a mix of military pressure and strategic maneuvering. He sent spies to gather intelligence, undermine key allies of the Chimu, and cut off vital trade routes. When the time was right, he ordered his son, Tupac Yupanqui, to lead a campaign that would take years to complete. The war was brutal. Battles raged across desert plains and coastal valleys, with neither side gaining a clear advantage for some time. Eventually, internal divisions within the Chimu weakened their resistance. Their ruler, Ninan Cuyoche, died under mysterious circumstances, possibly assassinated. Seizing the moment, the Incas pressed forward, capturing Chanchan and bringing the Chimu under their rule. With the coast secured, the empire stretched from the highlands to the sea, marking a major milestone in Inca expansion. Victory over the Chimu was a triumph, but controlling such a vast and diverse empire presented new challenges. The Incas did not simply absorb conquered peoples into their fold without effort. They implemented a system of governance designed to maintain order while minimizing rebellion. One key strategy was the use of mitmakuna, or colonists, who were relocated from loyal regions to newly conquered areas. These settlers served as cultural and political stabilizers, spreading Inca customs, language, and religious practices, while local elites were often allowed to retain positions of authority, provided they swore allegiance to the empire. Another tool of control was the quipu, a system of knotted strings used for record-keeping. Trained administrators known as quipu macayocs maintained detailed records of tribute, population, and resource distribution, enabling efficient governance across great distances. These strategies allowed the Incas to govern effectively, preventing unrest and fostering economic productivity. Yet despite their efforts, resistance simmered beneath the surface. Not all subjects welcomed Inca rule, and future rulers would face the consequences of these tensions. Despite the efficiency of Inca administration, expansion came at a steep price. War drained resources and lives. Every campaign required soldiers, weapons, and provisions, placing a heavy burden on the empire's economy. The construction of roads, temples, and administrative centers demanded labor on a massive scale. This labor was provided through the mita system, a form of mandatory public service that required communities to contribute work to the state. While the system helped maintain infrastructure and agricultural terraces, it also imposed hardship on subject populations. Some regions resented the constant demands placed upon them, leading to periodic uprisings.
Additionally, the integration of conquered peoples was not always smooth. Although the Incas allowed local customs to persist, they also enforced loyalty through strict rules. Any sign of rebellion was met with swift punishment. Entire communities suspected of disloyalty could be relocated or replaced with loyal settlers. These policies created a delicate balance between unity and control. The empire thrived as long as expansion continued, but cracks were forming beneath the surface. Future rulers would have to navigate these tensions carefully, lest they unravel the very system that had made the Incas so powerful.
Even as the empire reached its peak, signs of unrest grew harder to ignore. Some regions, particularly those on the empire's outer edges, resisted Inca rule more fiercely than others. The Colla of the Altiplano, the Cañari of Ecuador, and the Chachapoyas of the northern cloud forests were known for their defiance. The Chachapoyas, in particular, earned a reputation for their fierce independence. When the Incas finally subdued them, they found little cooperation. Many Chachapoya warriors chose death over submission rather than surrender. Resistance was not limited to borderlands. Even in core regions, discontent simmered beneath the surface. Local leaders who had once ruled independently now found themselves answerable to distant bureaucrats. Farmers bore the weight of tribute demands, while conscripted warriors fought in distant wars far from their homes. Some whispered of past freedoms, longing for the days before Inca domination. These tensions were kept in check by a strong central government, but they revealed a fundamental truth. The empire's power depended on continuous expansion. Without new conquests to fuel its economy and distract its enemies, the fragile balance of control could easily tip into chaos. When Pachacuti grew old, he faced a challenge common to many rulers throughout history: choosing a successor. His favored heir was his son, Tupac Yupanqui, the general who had led the conquest of the Chimu. Tupac had proven himself in battle and had already begun shaping the empire's future. Yet Pachacuti knew that the transition of power could be dangerous. He had seized control from his own father through force, and he did not want the same fate to befall his chosen heir. To ensure stability, he arranged for Tupac to assume many royal duties before his official coronation. However, not all accepted Tupac as the rightful heir. Rival factions within the royal family vied for influence, and some questioned whether Tupac had the strength to hold the empire together. When Pachacuti finally passed away around 1478, the succession unfolded without open conflict, but the underlying tensions remained. Tupac Yupanqui inherited a vast and powerful empire, but also a fragile web of alliances and unspoken rivalries. His ability to maintain control would determine whether the empire continued to thrive or began to fracture. Tupac Yupanqui wasted no time expanding the empire's borders. Following his father's legacy, he turned his attention to the northern highlands, where the powerful kingdom of Quito lay. This region, rich in resources and strategically located, had long resisted Inca advances. Its ruler, the aging king Yawarhuacac, struggled to maintain unity among his people. Seeing an opportunity, Tupac Yupanqui launched a campaign deep into the Ecuadorian Andes. The war was long and grueling. The terrain was treacherous, and the Quito warriors fought fiercely to defend their homeland. Tupac Yupanqui relied on both military skill and diplomacy to weaken his enemies. He exploited internal divisions, offering favorable terms to those who surrendered while crushing those who resisted. After years of conflict, the final blow came when Tupac Yupanqui captured the Quito capital. With this victory, the Inca Empire stretched farther than ever before, reaching the equator. Yet even as the empire expanded to its greatest extent, signs of strain were becoming impossible to ignore. With the empire stretching from modern-day Colombia to central Chile, the logistical challenges of maintaining control became immense. Governing such a vast territory required an army of administrators, engineers, and messengers working in perfect coordination. The road system, once a symbol of Inca ingenuity, now became a lifeline that had to be constantly maintained.
Supply lines had to stretch thousands of miles carrying food, textiles, and precious metals from one end of the empire to the other. Tribute collection became increasingly difficult as distant provinces resisted the heavy demands placed upon them. Communication delays meant that rebellions could erupt and spread before imperial authorities even learned of them. To counter these issues, the Incas stationed garrisons in key locations and relied on a network of runners, known as chusquis, to relay messages quickly. Still, the sheer size of the empire made governance a constant struggle. The empire had reached its limits, not because of external enemies, but because of the weight of its own ambitions. As the empire reached its maximum size, internal divisions threatened its stability. The ruling elite, once united under Pachacuti's vision, began to fracture into competing factions. The nobility in Cusco grew increasingly concerned about the rising power of regional governors, many of whom had built their own networks of influence in distant provinces. Some feared that if a governor gained too much autonomy, they might challenge the emperor's authority. This fear was not unfounded. Several high-ranking officials had already attempted to assert their independence, using local support to resist orders from the capital. To prevent further dissent, Tupac Yupanqui took steps to reinforce central control. He rotated officials between regions, ensuring that no single leader could establish permanent power in any one area. He also reinforced the role of the Sapa Inca, the emperor, as the ultimate authority. Despite these efforts, the seeds of division had already taken root. Loyalty to Cusco was strongest among the core provinces, but in the outer reaches of the empire, resentment simmered. The question was no longer whether the empire could expand, it was whether it could hold together. By the time Tupac Yupanqui passed away, the Inca Empire stood at its height. It was the largest and most sophisticated state in the pre-Columbian Americas. Its achievements were remarkable. A vast road system that connected thousands of settlements, a centralized bureaucracy that managed millions of people, and a military that had subdued countless rivals. Yet the cost of expansion was undeniable. The empire had grown too large to govern efficiently, and internal divisions threatened its stability. The conquests that had fueled its growth had also sown the seeds of its eventual collapse. When Tupac Yupanqui's son, Huayna Capac, inherited the throne, he faced the daunting task of holding together an empire stretched to its breaking point. He would attempt to maintain control through both military strength and political maneuvering. But the forces that had driven Inca expansion were also the ones that would lead to its downfall. The story of the empire's decline had already begun, waiting for the right moment to unfold. Huayna Capac inherited a vast empire, but also a fragile one. He understood the dangers of internal division and sought to strengthen his rule through both military campaigns and political alliances. Like his predecessors, he expanded the empire's borders, pushing deeper into the Amazon basin and securing control over the northern frontier. But these victories came at a cost. Campaigns drained resources, and the empire's administrative system struggled to keep pace with its rapid growth. Worse than all, Huayna Capac's decision to divide power between two of his sons would prove disastrous. He named his legitimate heir, Huáscar, as the next Sapa Inca in Cusco, while granting his favorite son, Atahualpa, control of the northern territories centered in Quito. This arrangement was meant to ease tensions and allow both princes to govern independently. However, it created a dangerous rivalry. The two brothers had different visions for the empire, and neither was willing to accept a subordinate role. When Huayna Capac aged, whispers of succession disputes spread. When he suddenly fell ill and died, likely from a European disease brought by early Spanish explorers, the empire stood on the brink of civil war.
With Huayna Capac dead and no clear successor, the empire fractured. Atahualpa, emboldened by his control over the northern provinces, refused to recognize Huáscar's authority. He gathered a powerful army composed of seasoned warriors from Quito and the northern frontier, many of whom had fought alongside him in recent campaigns. Huáscar, meanwhile, commanded the traditional heartland of the empire, drawing support from the nobility in Cusco and the elite troops trained in the capital. The war between the two brothers erupted with brutal intensity. Battles raged across the Andes, from the highland cities to the jungle foothills. Cities changed hands multiple times, and entire regions were ravaged by violence. Atahualpa's forces, hardened by years of warfare in the north, proved more disciplined and effective. He employed clever tactics, outmaneuvering Huáscar's armies and cutting off supply lines. The final showdown came near the city of Cajamarca, where Huáscar's forces were decisively defeated. Atahualpa emerged victorious, capturing his brother and ordering the execution of Huáscar's closest allies. Yet even as he claimed the throne, a greater threat loomed on the horizon, one that neither brother had foreseen. As the dust of civil war settled, news reached the Andes of strange visitors arriving on the Pacific coast. These newcomers were not traders or emissaries, but foreign warriors clad in metal armor, riding animals unknown to the continent. The first encounters between the Incas and the Spaniards had been cautious and confused. The Spanish, led by Francisco Pizarro, had landed on the northern coast years earlier, seeking wealth and opportunities for conquest. Though small in number, they possessed firearms, steel weapons, and horses, advantages that gave them a deadly edge in battle. More importantly, they carried diseases to which the indigenous population had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, and influenza had already begun to sweep through the Andes, decimating entire communities and weakening the empire from within. The timing of the Spaniards' arrival could not have been worse. The Civil War had left the empire exhausted, its people divided, and its leadership unstable. Atahualpa, fresh from his victory over Huáscar, was in Cajamarca when word arrived that the foreigners were approaching. He decided to confront them, believing he held the advantage. What followed would change the course of history forever. Atahualpa, confident in his numbers and recent victories, agreed to meet the Spaniards in Cajamarca. He arrived with an unarmed entourage of thousands, expecting a diplomatic encounter rather than a confrontation. The Spanish, however, had other plans. Under the cover of night, Pizarro and his men prepared an ambush. On November 16, 1532, as Atahualpa entered the city's main plaza, the Spaniards struck with terrifying speed. Gunfire shattered the air, horses charged through the stunned crowd, and steel blades slashed through flesh. Within minutes, thousands of Incas lay dead. Atahualpa himself was captured, dragged from his litter, and imprisoned. The slaughter was swift and merciless. The Spaniards lost fewer than 20 men, yet they had crippled the empire in a single day. Without their leader, the Incas were thrown into confusion. The empire, already weakened by civil war and disease, now faced an enemy unlike any before. The fall of Cajamarca was not just a military disaster, it was the beginning of the end for Tawantinsuyu. Though Atahualpa had fallen, the Inca Empire did not collapse overnight. His generals and commanders, shocked by the betrayal at Cajamarca, regrouped in the mountains. Some sought to negotiate, hoping to ransom their emperor in exchange for peace. Others prepared for war. Atahualpa himself, held captive by the Spaniards, agreed to fill a room with gold and silver in hopes of securing his release. When the ransom was paid, the Spaniards reneged on their promise. In July 1533, Atahualpa was executed, officially ending the line of undisputed Inca rulers. With no clear leadership, the empire fractured further. Some nobles supported installing a new emperor, Manco Inca Yupanqui, as a puppet ruler under Spanish control. Others rejected foreign rule entirely. The Andes became a battleground. Rebel armies waged guerrilla campaigns against the invaders, striking from remote mountain strongholds. Cities burned and blood ran through the streets. Yet despite their determination, the Incas could not match the Spaniards' weapons, tactics, or ruthless efficiency. Disease continued to ravage the land, claiming more lives than any sword. By 1536, organized resistance had crumbled, and the last remnants of the empire retreated into the jungle stronghold of Vilcabamba. From Vilcabamba, a final flicker of Inca resistance endured. Manco Inca Yupanqui, having escaped Spanish captivity, led a determined effort to reclaim his people's sovereignty.
He fortified the remote jungle city, rallying warriors and forging alliances with groups that had never fully submitted to Inca or Spanish rule. For nearly 40 decades, Vilcabamba remained a thorn in the side of the conquistadors. Raids disrupted colonial settlements, and rumors of an undefeated Inca stronghold spread fear among the Spanish. Yet survival in exile came at a terrible cost. Resources were scarce, and internal divisions weakened the resistance. Betrayal played a role in the end. In 1572, Spanish forces, under the command of Viceroy Francisco Toledo, launched a final campaign against Vilcabamba. They captured the city, executed the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, and scattered the remaining survivors. With that, the last independent Inca state ceased to exist. The empire that had once stretched across the Andes was gone, replaced by a Spanish colony that would reshape the region for centuries to come. Though the Inca Empire fell, its legacy endured. The ruins of Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, and countless other sites bear silent witness to the architectural brilliance of a vanished civilization. The Quechua language, once the administrative tongue of Tawantinsuyu, survives in the Andes, spoken by millions today. The descendants of the Incas continue to live in the highlands, preserving traditions that trace back to their ancestors. Yet, the fall of the empire also marked the beginning of profound transformation. Spanish rule imposed new systems of governance, religion, and economy, reshaping the social fabric of the Andes. Indigenous communities faced forced labor, cultural suppression, and waves of disease that drastically reduced their numbers. The empire's collapse was not merely a military defeat, it was the start of a painful reckoning with colonialism. Over time, elements of Inca culture blended with Spanish influences, creating a unique fusion that defines modern Andean identity. The echoes of the past remain, woven into the land, the language, and the resilience of those who carry the memory of the empire forward. The story of Inca expansion and collapse offers valuable lessons about the nature of power, ambition, and the fragility of empires. The Incas achieved extraordinary feats, unifying vast and diverse territories, building an intricate administrative system, and maintaining stability across thousands of miles. Their success was rooted in innovation, discipline, and adaptability. But even the most powerful states are vulnerable to internal divisions, external threats, and unforeseen crises. The very forces that enabled Inca expansion, military conquest, centralized control, and rapid growth, also contributed to their downfall. The civil war between Huascar and Atahualpa weakened the empire at a critical moment, making it susceptible to Spanish conquest. The reliance on the single ruler, the strain of governing distant provinces, and the impact of disease all played roles in the empire's collapse. These patterns are not unique to the Incas. History is filled with examples of mighty civilizations that flourished and then faded, undone by the very strengths that once made them great. Understanding the rise and fall of the Inca Empire provides insight not only into the past, but also into the enduring challenges of governance, unity, and resilience in the face of change. While much of history focuses on rulers and battles, the true cost of empire was borne by ordinary people. The expansion of Tawantinsuyu brought both prosperity and suffering. For many, life under Inca rule meant access to state-sponsored food storage, infrastructure projects, and protection from rival groups. However, it also meant conscription into the army, forced labor through the Mitha system, and relocation to unfamiliar lands. The Mitmakuna, or colonists, were moved from their homes to settle newly conquered regions, sometimes against their will. Entire communities were uprooted to serve the needs of the empire. Farmers worked fields that fed the state rather than their own families. Artisans crafted luxury goods for the elite, rarely benefiting from their own labor. Even in times of peace, the demands of the empire weighed heavily on the people. When war came, the burdens grew heavier. Tributes increased, conscription intensified, and resistance was met with harsh punishment. The voices of these everyday individuals are often lost in historical records, yet their struggles shaped the reality of Inca expansion. Their sacrifices fueled the empire's growth, and their suffering marked its decline.
Beyond the grand narrative of Inca conquests and imperial politics lie lesser-known stories that reveal the complexity of life in the Andes. Long before the rise of the Incas, countless cultures thrived across the region. The Wari, Tiwanaku, and Nazca had built impressive cities and developed sophisticated agricultural techniques. The Chimu had mastered metallurgy and constructed vast adobe palaces along the coast. Each of these civilizations contributed to the knowledge and traditions that the Incas later absorbed and refined. Even within the empire, diversity persisted. The Incas did not erase the identities of conquered peoples. Instead, they integrated them into a broader framework. Local languages, religious practices, and artistic styles coexisted with Inca customs. Some communities retained their own leaders, adapting to imperial rule while preserving their heritage. Archaeological discoveries continue to uncover evidence of these forgotten histories. Sites like Chavín de Huántar, Caral, and El Brujo reveal the depth of Andean civilization long before the Incas. These findings remind us that the empire was not the beginning of Andean history, but rather the culmination of millennia of human achievement. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Inca Empire is how they managed to build and sustain such a vast and complex state without a written language. Unlike the Maya, who developed hieroglyphic writing, or the Europeans who relied on alphabetic scripts, the Incas recorded information using a system of knotted cords called quipus. These devices, made of colored strings with knots tied in specific patterns, were used to track census data, tax records, and even historical narratives. Skilled specialists, known as quipu kamayoks, memorized the meanings of the knots and transmitted this knowledge orally. Scholars have long debated the full capabilities of the quipu, with some suggesting that it may have functioned as a form of proto-writing, capable of encoding more than just numerical data. Recent studies have uncovered patterns that hint at a deeper level of complexity, raising the possibility that the Incas had a method of recording language in ways we have yet to fully understand. If true, this would challenge long-held assumptions about the relationship between writing and statecraft, showing that sophisticated governance could exist without conventional text-based records. At the heart of Inca expansion was an engineering marvel that connected the empire from end to end, the road system. Spanning over 25,000 miles, these roads wove through mountains, deserts, and dense forests, linking the empire's vast territories. Constructed with precision, the roads were built using stone, gravel, and wooden bridges, often carved into cliffsides or suspended over deep gorges. Two main highways ran parallel to each other, one along the coast and the other through the highlands, while countless smaller paths branched out to villages, administrative centers, and sacred sites. The network facilitated rapid movement of armies, messengers, and goods, ensuring that the empire could respond swiftly to threats and maintain economic stability. Resting stations, called tampus, were positioned at regular intervals, providing shelter, food, and supplies for travelers. The chasquis, elite runners trained from childhood, used these roads to deliver messages across vast distances, covering up to 150 miles a day. Without this infrastructure, the Inca Empire could not have sustained its expansion. The road system was not just a means of travel, it was the backbone of imperial control, binding the empire together in ways that few civilizations had achieved before.
Religion was not just a personal belief system for the Incas. It was a tool of governance and unification. The empire's official religion revolved around the worship of Inti, the sun god, and the divine status of the Sapa Inca, who was believed to be Inti's earthly representative. Temples dedicated to the sun, such as the famed Coricancha in Cusco, housed golden statues and treasures that symbolize the empire's wealth and spiritual power. However, the Incas did not impose their beliefs on conquered peoples outright. Instead, they practiced a form of religious syncretism, incorporating local deities and sacred sites into their state religion.
This strategy helped ease tensions and foster a sense of shared identity among diverse groups. Pilgrimages to holy places like the Island of the Sun on Lake Titicaca reinforced the spiritual connection between the people and the ruling elite. Rituals, festivals, and offerings played a crucial role in maintaining cosmic balance and legitimizing Inca rule. By weaving faith into the fabric of daily life, the empire ensured that its subjects saw their rulers not just as political leaders, but as divine intermediaries between the heavens and the earth. The success of the Inca Empire was deeply tied to its mastery of agriculture. In a region of extreme landscapes, steep mountains, arid coasts, and high-altitude plateaus, the Incas developed innovative farming techniques that maximized food production. Terraced fields, known as endins, transformed sloped hillsides into productive farmland, preventing erosion and conserving water. Irrigation canals channeled meltwater from glaciers to crops, ensuring steady harvest even in dry seasons. The empire cultivated a wide variety of crops, including potatoes, maize, quinoa, and coca, each adapted to different elevations and climates. Storage facilities called cochas regulated water flow, while underground grain silos preserved surplus food for years. These advancements allowed the Incas to sustain large populations and support military campaigns far from the heartland. Beyond practicality, agriculture was also a sacred duty. Farmers believed that their labor honored the gods, particularly Mama Sera, the maize goddess, and Ilapa, the thunder god. The combination of scientific knowledge and spiritual devotion made Inca agriculture one of the most sophisticated systems of its time, ensuring the empire's survival and expansion. While Inca history often highlights the deeds of male rulers and warriors, women played crucial roles in shaping the empire's structure and stability. Noble women, particularly the Koya or queen, wielded significant influence at court. They advised rulers, managed estates, and participated in religious ceremonies. The Aklas, or chosen women, were selected from noble families and trained in weaving, brewing, and ritual duties. Some served as priestesses in temples, while others were married to high-ranking officials to strengthen political alliances. Women also held economic power, overseeing agricultural production and textile workshops that produced garments for the elite. In times of crisis, women could act as regents or even lead rebellions. Despite being excluded from formal political office, their contributions were essential to the functioning of the empire. Their stories, often overlooked in historical records, reveal a society where women exercised authority in ways that extended beyond domestic life. Recognizing their roles adds depth to our understanding of Inca civilization, showing that power was not solely concentrated in the hands of kings and generals. Surviving in the Andes required the Incas to master the unpredictable forces of nature. The region's climate was prone to extreme variations. Droughts, floods, and frost could devastate crops and threaten entire communities. To combat these challenges, the Incas developed sophisticated environmental management techniques. They built extensive canal systems and reservoirs to regulate water supply, ensuring that fields remained fertile even in dry years. Elevated agricultural platforms, known as waru-waru, protected crops from frost by trapping heat in raised beds. The empire also practiced vertical farming, cultivating different crops at varying altitudes to maximize yields. State-run granaries stored surplus food, allowing redistribution during times of scarcity. These strategies were not just agricultural innovations, they were forms of risk management that safeguarded the empire against ecological disasters. By understanding and adapting to their environment, the Incas ensured that their civilization could endure even in the face of nature's harshest conditions. As the last embers of Inca resistance faded in the jungles of Vilcabamba, the surviving leaders faced a grim reality. The empire that had once stretched across the Andes was gone, and with it, the dreams of restoring Tawantinsuyu. The final rulers of Vilcabamba, though defiant, knew they could not withstand the full force of Spanish power indefinitely. When Tupac Amaru, the last recognized Sapa Inca, was captured and executed in 1572, it marked the definitive end of Inca sovereignty. His final words, according to some accounts, were a plea for mercy, not for himself, but for his people. "I die innocent, and I ask God may forgive you for the injustice you commit." Whether these exact words were spoken remains uncertain, but they capture the sorrow and injustice felt by those who witnessed the destruction of their world. The fall of the Inca Empire was not just the loss of a dynasty, it was the collapse of an entire way of life. Yet even in defeat, the spirit of the Andes endured, carried forward by those who refused to forget their ancestors.
Though the empire itself has long since vanished, its influence continues to shape the Andes today. The descendants of the Incas, along with other indigenous groups, make up a significant portion of the population in countries such as Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and parts of Argentina and Chile. Many still speak Quechua or Aymara, the languages of their ancestors, and preserve traditional customs in music, dance, and clothing. Festivals honoring ancient deities and Inca heritage are celebrated annually, blending Catholic and indigenous traditions into vibrant displays of cultural pride. In modern politics, indigenous rights movements draw inspiration from the past, advocating for recognition, land rights, and representation. Historians and archaeologists continue to uncover lost cities and artifacts, shedding light on the sophistication of Inca engineering, astronomy, and governance. Even global culture has embraced Inca heritage, with Machu Picchu standing as one of the most iconic archaeological wonders of the world. The empire may have fallen, but its legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of those who call the Andes home, ensuring that the story of the Incas will never be forgotten. Despite centuries of study, the origins of the Inca people remain shrouded in mystery. According to legend, the first Inca, Manco Capac, emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca with his siblings, guided by the sun god Inti to found a new civilization. This myth, passed down through oral tradition, suggests a symbolic rather than literal origin, reflecting the Incas' desire to legitimize their rule through divine ancestry. However, archaeological evidence paints a more complex picture. Early Inca settlements near Lake Titicaca date back to at least the 12th century, but the transition from a small kingdom to a dominant empire was gradual and influenced by earlier Andean civilizations. The Wari and Tiahuanacu cultures, which flourished centuries before the Incas, likely played a role in shaping their political and religious structures. Yet, the exact path of Inca development remains unclear. Did they emerge as a distinct people through migration, or did they evolve from existing Andean societies? The lack of written records from their earliest periods makes it difficult to reconstruct their origins with certainty. Ongoing research continues to piece together fragments of their past, revealing a civilization whose roots extend deeper than previously imagined. To the Incas, the sky was more than a backdrop. It was a living map that dictated the rhythms of life. They observed celestial bodies with remarkable precision, aligning temples, roads, and agricultural cycles with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. The solstices and equinoxes were especially important, marking key moments in the agricultural calendar and guiding rituals performed at sacred sites like Cusco and Machu Picchu. Priests, known as Yache Camak, studied the heavens to predict seasonal changes and interpret omens. Certain constellations were believed to represent animals and spirits, influencing decisions related to warfare, planting, and governance. The Milky Way, which the Incas called Mayu, or the river, was seen as a celestial counterpart to earthly rivers, connecting the heavens to the land below. Lunar phases were used to determine the timing of festivals and agricultural activities. By integrating astronomy into daily life, the Incas created a worldview in which the cosmos and the earth were deeply intertwined, reinforcing their belief in the divine order of the universe.
Unlike modern conceptions of time as a linear progression, the Incas understood time as cyclical and deeply tied to the natural world.
Seasons, celestial events, and agricultural cycles formed the rhythm of life, with each year repeating in a pattern dictated by the land and sky. The empire's calendar was structured around religious festivals and agricultural milestones, ensuring that time was measured not in abstract units, but in tangible experiences. Memory, too, was preserved differently. Without a written language, the Incas relied on oral tradition and mnemonic devices like the quipu to transmit knowledge across generations. Elders and scholars, known as amaltas, played a crucial role in maintaining historical records, passing down myths, genealogies, and lessons through storytelling. The past was not something distant, it was alive in rituals, songs, and the physical layout of cities. Even after the empire's fall, these traditions endured, keeping the spirit of the Inca world alive in the memories of those who refused to let their history be erased. For the Incas, nature was not simply a resource to be used, it was a living entity, imbued with spiritual significance. Mountains, rivers, and forests were considered sacred, each possessing its own apus, or guardian spirits. The highest peaks were revered as powerful beings that watched over the land and its people. Offerings of food, textiles, and even human sacrifices were made to appease these spirits and ensure balance in the natural world. The Incas believed in Aini, a principle of reciprocity that governed relationships between humans, the gods, and the environment. Just as farmers gave labor to the land, they expected the land to provide in return. This philosophy extended to governance as well. Rulers were seen as stewards of the earth, responsible for maintaining harmony between the people and nature. Deforestation, overuse of resources, and pollution were avoided to angering the spirits. By treating the natural world with reverence, the Incas ensured the sustainability of their empire, recognizing that their survival depended on respecting the delicate balance of the Andean ecosystem. The strength of the Inca Empire rested not only on diplomacy and administration, but also on its formidable military. Unlike the decentralized warrior bands of many Andean societies, the Inca army was a highly organized force, trained, equipped, and deployed with precision. Soldiers were drawn from conquered territories as well as the core provinces, ensuring a steady supply of manpower. Recruitment was based on age and regional quotas, with young men undergoing rigorous training in specialized schools called yachewasi. Warfare was not merely a means of conquest, but a test of discipline and loyalty. The military was divided into units of 10, 50, 100, and 1,000, each commanded by officers who answered directly to the emperor. Tactics emphasized mobility, coordination, and psychological warfare. Armored warriors wielding clubs, spears, and slings advanced in tight formations, supported by archers and javelin throwers. Sieges were conducted with careful planning, using tunnels, scaling ladders, and starvation tactics to break enemy defenses. The Incas also employed deception, sending scouts ahead to gather intelligence and spread fear. Victory was not just about defeating an enemy in battle, it was about breaking their will to resist. The Inca Empire operated on a system that combined centralized control with localized production, creating a complex economic network that sustained millions. Unlike market economies where goods were bought and sold, the Inca economy functioned primarily through a system of tribute and redistribution. Communities were expected to contribute labor, crops, or crafts to the state in exchange for food, tools, and protection. The state collected surplus goods in vast storehouses and redistributed them as needed, ensuring that even in times of drought or famine, no region was left without essentials. Tribute could take many forms: agricultural products, textiles, or military service. The mita system required citizens to perform state labor, constructing roads, buildings, or irrigation systems. In return, they received food, clothing, and housing from the state. Trade did exist, but it was largely informal, occurring between neighboring communities or through merchants known as Incas, who traveled long distances exchanging luxury goods like coca leaves, shells, and dyes. This system allowed the empire to maintain stability and self-sufficiency, ensuring that every person played a role in sustaining the whole. Although the Inca Empire is often associated with the towering peaks of the Andes, its reach extended to the Pacific coast, where it incorporated maritime cultures into its domain. The Chimu, Mochica, and other coastal societies had long thrived on fishing, trade, and irrigation-based agriculture. When the Incas conquered these regions, they did not abandon these practices, but integrated them into their imperial system. Coastal provinces were required to pay tribute in fish, dried seafood, and cotton, which were transported inland via the road network. The Incas also built tombos, or way stations, along the coast to support naval expeditions and trade. Fishermen were organized into state-controlled guilds, ensuring a steady supply of food for urban centers and military campaigns. Some coastal communities were even relocated to serve specific economic functions, such as producing salt or crafting ceremonial items from seashells. Despite their inland origins, the Incas recognized the value of the ocean and adapted their governance to include maritime resources, demonstrating their ability to incorporate diverse environments into their empire. Beyond the highlands and coast, the Inca Empire extended into the eastern slopes of the Andes and the upper reaches of the Amazon basin. This region, known as the Antisuyu, was home to dense rainforests, rugged terrain, and numerous indigenous groups who had never been fully subdued. Unlike the highly organized societies of the highlands, the forest dwellers lived in smaller, semi-nomadic communities, relying on hunting, gathering, and slash-and-burn agriculture. The Incas approached these groups with a mix of force and diplomacy. Some were incorporated into the empire through tribute and trade, supplying the state with exotic goods such as feathers, medicinal plants, and coca leaves. Others resisted fiercely, engaging in guerrilla warfare that made full conquest difficult. The Incas built fortresses and roadways into the jungle, attempting to project their authority, but control remained tenuous. The region was valued not only for its resources, but also for its strategic position, serving as a buffer zone against external threats. The struggle to dominate the Amazon frontier revealed the limits of Inca power, showing that even the mightiest empire could not fully tame every corner of its domain. Astronomy played a crucial role in Inca society, influencing everything from agriculture to governance. The Incas closely observed the movements of celestial bodies, using them to determine the best times for planting, harvesting, and conducting rituals. The solstices and equinoxes were especially significant, marking key transitions in the agricultural cycle. At sites like Cusco and Machu Picchu, temples and observatories were aligned with astronomical events, allowing priests to track the passage of time with remarkable accuracy. The Pleiades star cluster, known as Collier Yachai, was particularly important, as its visibility was believed to predict the success of upcoming harvests. Farmers relied on these observations to plan their work, ensuring that crops were planted and harvested at optimal times. The Incas also used the lunar calendar to organize religious festivals, with each month dedicated to a different deity or event. By integrating astronomy into daily life, the Incas maintained a deep connection between the heavens and the earth, reinforcing their belief in a universe governed by divine order. The medical knowledge of the Incas was surprisingly advanced, combining empirical observation with spiritual healing. Healers, known as pacos or hechiceros, treated illnesses using a combination of herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and ritualistic practices. Coca leaves were widely used to alleviate altitude sickness and fatigue, while quinine, derived from cinchona bark, was employed to treat fevers centuries before European scientists isolated the compound from malaria treatment. Surgery was performed with remarkable precision, with evidence suggesting that Inca physicians practiced trepanation, a procedure in which holes were drilled into the skull to relieve pressure from injuries or headaches. Anesthetics such as ayahuasca and tobacco smoke were used to dull pain, and wounds were cleaned with antiseptic substances like balsam.
Healing was not purely physical. Illness was often seen as a disruption of balance between the body, mind, and spirit. Shamans played a crucial role in diagnosing and curing ailments, interpreting dreams, and performing purification rites to restore harmony. This holistic approach to medicine reflected the Inca belief that health was inseparable from the natural and spiritual worlds.
Weaving was more than a craft in Inca society. It was a symbol of power, identity, and cultural expression. Textiles were among the most prized possessions in the empire, often valued more highly than gold or silver. The finest garments, known as kumbi, were produced by specially trained artisans called aklikuna, who worked in state-run workshops under strict supervision. These textiles featured intricate geometric patterns and vibrant dyes derived from plants, insects, and minerals. Colors and designs carried deep meaning, indicating rank, ethnicity, and even geographic origin. Royal garments were woven with rare materials such as vicuña wool and adorned with gold thread, setting the elite apart from commoners. Weaving was also a communal activity, with families contributing to the production of cloth for tribute and daily use. The process involved spinning, dyeing, and weaving on backstrap looms, techniques that required immense skill and patience. Beyond clothing, textiles were used in religious ceremonies, diplomatic gifts, and even as currency in certain contexts. The artistry of Inca weaving was not only a testament to technical mastery, but also a reflection of the empire's values: precision, hierarchy, and devotion to tradition. Despite lacking a formal alphabet, the Inca Empire developed sophisticated methods of recording information, most notably through the quipu. This system of knotted cords was used to track census data, tax records, and historical events, serving as a vital administrative tool across the vast empire. Each quipu consisted of a primary cord with multiple attached strings, differentiated by color, length, and knot placement. Experts, known as quipu kamayokes, memorized the meanings of these knots, transmitting knowledge orally alongside the physical device. While traditionally thought to be limited to numerical data, recent research suggests that quipus may have encoded more complex information, potentially functioning as a form of proto-writing. Some scholars argue that patterns in the knots correspond to syllables or symbols, indicating that the Incas may have had a non-alphabetic script. If confirmed, this discovery would challenge long-held assumptions about the relationship between writing and estate formation. Regardless of their exact function, quipus demonstrate the Inca ability to develop alternative systems of knowledge preservation, proving that literacy need not rely on ink and paper to be effective. Warfare was a defining aspect of Inca expansion, yet their approach to conflict was far more nuanced than mere conquest. Before engaging in battle, Inca diplomats often attempted to secure peaceful submission through negotiation, promising benefits such as protection, infrastructure improvements, and integration into the imperial economy. If persuasion failed, military force was employed with calculated efficiency. The Inca army was structured into highly disciplined units, each led by experienced commanders who coordinated maneuvers with precision. Combat was not chaotic, it was a carefully orchestrated sequence of attacks, retreats, and flanking movements. The Incas favored overwhelming force, using superior numbers and psychological tactics to intimidate opponents. Archers and slingers softened enemy ranks before shock troops armed with macanas, wooden swords embedded with sharp stones, and spears closed in for hand-to-hand combat. Siege warfare was also a specialty, with engineers constructing ramps, tunnels, and barricades to breach fortified cities. Once a region was subdued, the Incas ensured lasting control by relocating loyal populations, appointing trusted governors, and incorporating local leaders into the imperial administration. This blend of diplomacy, military prowess, and strategic governance allowed the Incas to expand their empire with remarkable speed and effectiveness.
Justice in the Inca Empire was not merely about punishment, it was a mechanism for maintaining social order and reinforcing the moral code of aini, or reciprocity. The legal system was hierarchical, with laws enforced at various levels, from local village elders to imperial judges appointed by the Sapa Inca himself. Crimes such as theft, adultery, and disobedience were met with strict penalties, ranging from public humiliation and forced labor to execution in severe cases. Nobles and commoners were judged differently, with higher expectations placed on the elite. Corruption among officials was particularly frowned upon as it threatened the stability of the state. However, justice was not solely punitive. Rehabilitation and restitution were also key components. Offenders were often given the chance to redeem themselves through service to the community or the state. Disputes between individuals were settled through mediation, with elders acting as arbitrators to restore harmony. The emphasis was not just on enforcing laws, but on ensuring that every member of society fulfilled their role in maintaining the balance of the empire. This system of justice, deeply rooted in tradition and social responsibility, played a crucial role in sustaining the cohesion of the vast Inca state. Inca architecture stands as one of the most remarkable achievements of the ancient world, blending functionality with aesthetic precision. The Incas constructed cities, temples, and fortresses using finely cut stone blocks fitted together without mortar, a technique known as ashlar masonry. These stones were shaped with such accuracy that they interlocked seamlessly, creating structures that could withstand earthquakes and the test of time. Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, and Ollantaytambo exemplify this mastery, with walls that appear almost impossibly precise. The Incas quarried massive stones, sometimes weighing several tons, and transported them over great distances using ropes, wooden sleds, and human labor. Buildings were designed to harmonize with the natural landscape, often following the contours of the land rather than altering it. Drainage systems, terraces, and underground channels were incorporated into constructions to manage water flow and prevent erosion. Beyond their practical purposes, Inca buildings also held deep religious and political significance. Temples were aligned with celestial events, and palaces served as centers of governance and ceremony. This architectural genius not only showcased the Incas' engineering skills, but also reflected their philosophy of balance between human ingenuity and the natural world. Sound played a vital role in Inca society, serving as a medium for communication, ritual, and military coordination. The Incas utilized a variety of instruments, including panpipes, drums, conch shell trumpets, and rattles, to create music that resonated across the Andes. Music was not merely entertainment, it was deeply embedded in religious ceremonies, state rituals, and social gatherings. During festivals and battles, rhythmic drumming and blowing conch shells signaled commands, unified troops, and instilled fear in enemies. The pututu, a trumpet made from a marine shell, was used to announce the presence of royalty or to call people to assembly. In temples, priests chanted and played instruments to honor the gods, believing that sound carried prayers to the heavens. Even the Chasquis, the empire's elite runners, used whistles and calls to communicate across vast distances, ensuring that messages traveled swiftly along the road network. The strategic use of sound reinforced the power of the state, creating an auditory landscape that connected the empire's diverse regions and reinforced the presence of Inca authority in daily life. Animals played a central role in Inca society, serving as sources of labor, food, and spiritual symbolism. Llamas and alpacas were the most important domesticated animals, providing wool, meat, and transportation. Llamas, in particular, were essential to the empire's economy, carrying goods across the vast road system and serving as pack animals in high-altitude trade routes. Herders, known as heredon, managed large flocks, ensuring a steady supply of resources for the state. In religious ceremonies, animals were often sacrificed to appease the gods, with llamas dyed in vibrant colors offered to Inti, the sun god. Other creatures held symbolic meaning. The condor represented the heavens, the puma symbolized the earthly world, and the serpent embodied the underworld. These three realms formed the foundation of Inca cosmology, illustrating the interconnectedness of life.
Dogs, while less prominent, were kept as companions and guards, while wild animals like jaguars and spectacled bears were revered as powerful spirits. The Incas' relationship with animals was not of dominance, but of mutual respect, reflecting their belief in the balance between humanity and nature.
Food was not only sustenance for the Incas, it was a reflection of their environment, culture, and social structure. The empire's diverse geography allowed for a wide variety of ingredients, from highland tubers and grains to coastal seafood and Amazonian fruits. Potatoes, quinoa, maize, and amaranth formed the foundation of the Inca diet, supplemented by guinea pig, llama meat, and fish. Cooking techniques varied by region, with methods such as roasting, boiling, fermenting, and drying ensuring that food could be preserved for long journeys and military campaigns. One of the most notable culinary innovations was chuño, a freeze-dried potato product that could be stored for years without spoiling. This lightweight, nutritious food was crucial for sustaining armies and laborers. Meals were often communal, with large gatherings featuring elaborate feasts during festivals and religious ceremonies. The preparation and sharing of food were deeply tied to social bonds, reinforcing the principles of aini, reciprocity, and collective responsibility. Even today, many traditional dishes reflect Inca culinary traditions, preserving the flavors of an empire that once ruled the Andes. Storytelling was a vital part of Inca culture, serving as both entertainment and education. Since the Incas did not have a written language, they relied on oral tradition to pass down knowledge, history, and moral lessons. Elders, known as amautas, were respected as storytellers and historians, entrusted with preserving the empire's past. They recited epic tales of creation, heroism, and conquest, ensuring that each generation understood its place within the grand narrative of Tawantinsuyu. Myths such as the origin of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, the legendary founders of Cusco, were told to reinforce the divine right of the Sapa Inca. Fables and parables conveyed ethical teachings, teaching values such as loyalty, courage, and humility. These stories were often performed with music, dance, and dramatic gestures, making them memorable and engaging. Even after the fall of the empire, these oral traditions survived, passed down through families and communities. Today, elements of Inca storytelling persist in Andean folklore, ensuring that the voices of the past continue to echo through time. Though the Inca Empire was primarily a land-based civilization, it demonstrated remarkable skill in navigating the challenging terrain of the Andes. The Incas did not rely on wheeled transport or written maps, yet they developed an intricate system of trails, bridges, and markers that allowed them to traverse vast distances with precision. The road network, spanning over 25,000 miles, included suspension bridges made of braided grass cables, some of which spanned deep gorges and rivers. These structures, rebuilt annually by local communities, allowed safe passage for travelers, traders, and armies. Wayfinding was aided by visual landmarks, such as stone pillars and temple alignments, which guided travelers along predetermined routes. The chasquis, or runner messengers, memorized the entire network, ensuring that messages and supplies moved efficiently across the empire. Even in the absence of wheels or compasses, the Incas mastered navigation, using their knowledge of the land, stars, and oral tradition to maintain control over one of the most geographically diverse empires of the ancient world.